The autumn rain fell steadily against the windows of Kensington Palace as Catherine, the Duchess of Cambridge, stood quietly in her private study. The ornate room, usually filled with the warm sounds of her children's laughter echoing from nearby corridors, felt unusually somber this morning. She held a delicate china teacup in her hands, though the tea had long since grown cold. News had arrived 3 hours earlier that would change everything. Queen Elizabeth II, the woman who had welcomed Catherine into the royal family with such grace and warmth, had passed away peacefully at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. At 96 years old, the Queen had lived a remarkable life of service, but her death still came as a profound shock to the entire royal family. William had received the call first, his face immediately draining of color as he listened to the solemn words from his father, now King Charles III. Catherine watched helplessly as her husband's shoulders sagged under the weight of grief, and the sudden realization that their lives would never be the same again. The man she had fallen in love with at university, who had always carried the burden of his future crown with quiet dignity, now faced the reality that his time to serve was approaching much sooner than anyone had anticipated. Throughout their marriage, Catherine had witnessed William's deep love and respect for his grandmother. The Queen had been more than a monarch to him. She had been a source of wisdom, stability, and unconditional love during some of the most difficult periods of his life. When his mother, Princess Diana, had died tragically when William was just 15, the Queen had stepped in to provide the maternal guidance he desperately needed. Catherine remembered the countless Sunday lunches at Windsor Castle, where the Queen would listen intently to William's concerns about his royal duties, offering gentle advice while ensuring their children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, felt completely at ease in her presence. The Queen had a special gift for making even the most formal occasions feel warm and family-oriented. The couple had been scheduled to attend a charity gala that evening, but now their calendars would be cleared for the foreseeable future. The period of mourning would require them to step into roles they had been preparing for their entire married life, yet nothing could have truly prepared them for the emotional weight of this moment. As Catherine placed her teacup on the antique mahogany desk, she reflected on her own relationship with the Queen. When she first began dating William seriously during their university years, she had been terrified at the prospect of meeting the monarch. Growing up in a middle-class family in Berkshire, Catherine had never imagined she would one day curtsy to the Queen of England, let alone become part of the royal family. Their first meeting had taken place on a crisp winter afternoon at Sandringham House. Catherine had spent weeks preparing, practicing her curtsy, and learning the proper protocols for addressing Her Majesty. But when the moment arrived, the Queen's warm smile and genuine interest in Catherine's background immediately put her at ease. Over the years, their relationship had deepened into something Catherine treasured beyond words. The Queen had become a mentor, teaching her about the intricacies of royal life while always emphasizing the importance of remaining true to her own values and personality. During Catherine's early struggles with intense media attention, the Queen had offered both practical advice and emotional support. The Queen had also been instrumental in helping Catherine navigate her role as a mother to future heirs to the throne. She shared stories about raising her own children while maintaining her royal duties, and always reminded Catherine that being a loving mother was just as important as any official engagement. Now, as Catherine prepared to face the most challenging period of her royal life, she drew strength from all the lessons the Queen had taught her. The coming weeks would test every skill she had learned about grace under pressure, public service, and supporting her family during times of crisis. William entered the study quietly, his eyes red from crying. Without saying a word, Catherine crossed the room and embraced him, feeling the tension in his shoulders as he struggled to process his grief. They stood together in silence, drawing comfort from each other's presence as they had done so many times before during difficult moments. Outside, the rain continued to fall, and soon the rest of the world would learn of their loss. But in this quiet moment, before the protocols and public duties took over, they were simply a husband and wife mourning the loss of someone they had both loved deeply. The woman who had guided them through their courtship, their wedding, and their early years of marriage was gone, but her influence would continue to shape their lives in ways they were only beginning to understand. The massive oak doors of Buckingham Palace opened to reveal a scene that would be etched into the memory of everyone present. Catherine and William stepped out together, their faces composed but clearly marked by grief, as they prepared to meet the thousands of people who had gathered to pay their respects to the late Queen. The crowd stretched as far as the eye could see, a sea of faces from every walk of life united in their shared sense of loss. Flowers, photographs, and handwritten notes created a colorful tapestry of remembrance along the palace gates. Children held small Union Jack flags while elderly citizens wiped away tears, remembering the 7 decades of faithful service they had witnessed. Catherine had chosen to wear a simple black dress with pearls that had belonged to the Queen, a subtle but meaningful tribute that did not go unnoticed by the mourners. William wore his military uniform, the weight of his new responsibilities visible in every step he took. Together, they began what would become known as the most emotionally powerful walkabout of their royal careers. As they approached the crowd, Catherine noticed an elderly woman in the front row clutching a faded photograph of herself and the Queen from many decades earlier. The woman's hands shook as she tried to speak, overwhelmed by the opportunity to share her memory with the royal couple. Catherine knelt down to the woman's eye level, taking her weathered hands gently in her own. The gesture was simple but profound, showing a level of empathy and connection that touched everyone watching. The elderly woman began to tell her story about meeting the Queen as a young girl during a royal visit to her hometown, and how that brief encounter had inspired her to dedicate her life to community service. William, meanwhile, found himself in conversation with a group of military veterans who had served during various conflicts throughout the Queen's reign. Their stories of dedication and sacrifice reminded him of the values his grandmother had embodied throughout her life. One veteran, a man in his 80s who had served in the Falklands War, saluted William with tears in his eyes, saying that the Queen had personally written to his family when he was wounded in action. As the couple moved through the crowd, their natural warmth and genuine interest in each person's story began to create something magical. People who had come to express their condolences found themselves also offering support to William and Catherine, recognizing the immense burden they now carried. A young mother with 2 small children caught Catherine's attention. The woman explained that she had brought her children to teach them about the importance of saying goodbye with respect and gratitude. The children, a boy and girl around the same ages as George and Charlotte, presented Catherine with drawings they had made of the Queen surrounded by her beloved corgis. Catherine's eyes filled with tears as she accepted the artwork, knowing how much the Queen would have treasured such innocent expressions of love. She promised the children that their drawings would be kept safe and shared with her own children, who were also learning to cope with the loss of their great-grandmother. The emotional intensity of the walkabout continued to build as William encountered a group of teenagers who had organized a memorial service at their school. They spoke passionately about how the Queen had inspired them to get involved in community projects and charitable work. Their enthusiasm and genuine sadness at losing such a positive role model clearly moved William, who spent considerable time discussing their plans for continuing their service projects in the Queen's memory. Throughout the afternoon, Catherine and William demonstrated a perfect balance of royal dignity and human warmth. They listened to countless stories, accepted hundreds of floral tributes, and offered comfort to people who had traveled from across the country to be part of this historic moment. One particularly touching encounter involved a woman who had been born on the same day the Queen was crowned in 1953. She had followed the royal family her entire life and spoke eloquently about how the Queen's example of duty and service had guided her through her own challenges, including raising 5 children as a single mother and building a successful business that employed dozens of people in her community. As the sun began to set, casting a golden light over the palace grounds, Catherine and William concluded their walkabout with a moment of quiet reflection. They stood together at the palace gates, looking out at the incredible display of love and respect that surrounded them. The day had shown them something they would never forget: the profound impact one person's life of service could have on millions of others. Every story they heard, every tear they witnessed, every expression of gratitude reinforced the importance of the role they would now fulfill together. As they returned to the palace, both Catherine and William knew that this day had changed them. They had seen firsthand the responsibility that came with their position, but they had also witnessed the incredible capacity for love and unity that existed within the nation they would serve. The walkabout had become much more than a formal royal duty. It had been a deeply personal experience that strengthened their resolve to honor the Queen's legacy through their own service. The connections they made with ordinary people facing extraordinary grief would influence their approach to royal duties for years to come. always remembering that behind every formal engagement were real people with real stories worthy of respect and attention. The ancient stones of Westminster Abbey had witnessed countless historic moments over the centuries, but perhaps none as emotionally charged as the state funeral that was about to unfold. Catherine sat in the front row alongside William, their children positioned between them, as 2,000 mourners filled every available seat in the magnificent Gothic cathedral. The weight of tradition pressed down on everyone present. Presidents, prime ministers, and monarchs from around the world had traveled to London to pay their final respects. But at the center of it all sat a family saying goodbye to someone they had loved deeply as a grandmother, mentor, and friend. Catherine had spent the previous evening helping her children understand what would happen during the service. 8-year-old George, now second in line to the throne, had asked difficult questions about death and duty that reminded Catherine of conversations she had once had with the Queen about preparing children for their future roles while allowing them to simply be children. Princess Charlotte, 7 years old and remarkably perceptive, had insisted on wearing a small brooch that the Queen had given her for her last birthday. The delicate piece of jewelry featured a horse and rider, reflecting the Queen's lifelong passion for equestrian sports. Catherine had helped Charlotte fasten it carefully that morning, both of them understanding its significance as a personal connection to their beloved great-grandmother. 4-year-old Prince Louis had initially been scheduled to attend, but William and Catherine had ultimately decided he was too young for such a solemn and lengthy ceremony. The decision had been difficult, but they wanted to protect his childhood innocence while still helping him understand the importance of the day. As the service began, the haunting notes of the organ filled the abbey, and Catherine felt William reach for her hand. His grip was steady, but she could sense the enormous emotional effort it took for him to maintain his composure. As the future Prince of Wales, he understood that millions of people around the world were watching, drawing strength from his dignity during this moment of national grief. The Archbishop of Canterbury began the service with words that seemed to speak directly to everyone's hearts about a life lived in service to others. Catherine found herself thinking about all the private moments she had shared with the Queen, conversations about motherhood, duty, and finding balance between personal happiness and public responsibility. She remembered one particularly meaningful conversation that had taken place during a quiet weekend at Balmoral. The Queen had been teaching Charlotte how to care for the horses, patiently explaining how responsibility and gentleness must work together. As they watched Charlotte brush one of the gentle mares, the Queen had turned to Catherine and said that the most important lesson she could pass on was that true leadership comes from understanding and caring about the people you serve. During the service, as prayers and hymns filled the sacred space, Catherine noticed how different members of the royal family were coping with their grief. Some sat with military precision, their emotions carefully controlled, while others allowed tears to flow freely. She realized that there was no single correct way to mourn, and that the Queen herself would have understood and accepted all of these different responses. The moment that would be remembered by millions came when the Dean of Windsor read a personal message that the Queen had written to be shared only after her death. In her own words, she thanked the people of the Commonwealth for their loyalty and support throughout her long reign, and expressed her hope that future generations would continue to serve with the same dedication and love for their fellow citizens. As these words echoed through the abbey, Catherine saw William's shoulders tremble slightly, and she knew he was thinking about the enormous responsibility that would one day be his. She squeezed his hand gently, a small gesture that conveyed her unwavering support for whatever challenges lay ahead. Prince George sat with remarkable composure for a child his age, clearly understanding the solemnity of the occasion even if he couldn't fully grasp its historical significance. Catherine had worried about bringing him, but seeing his quiet dignity made her proud and reminded her of the Queen's own belief that children should be included in important family moments when appropriate. Princess Charlotte surprised everyone by placing a small hand on her father's arm during one particularly emotional moment, an instinctive gesture of comfort that showed wisdom beyond her years. The Queen would have been delighted to see such natural empathy in her great-granddaughter. As the service reached its conclusion, the last post played by military buglers created one of the most moving moments any of them had ever experienced. The sound seemed to hang in the air, carrying with it the weight of 7 decades of faithful service and the promise of continuation by those left behind. When the final prayers were said and the Queen's coffin began its journey to Windsor Castle for the private burial service, Catherine felt a mixture of profound sadness and unexpected relief. The public portion of their goodbye was complete, but the real work of honoring the Queen's memory through their own service was just beginning. As they left Westminster Abbey, Catherine and William walked hand in hand with their children, knowing that they were no longer the same people who had entered the cathedral that morning. They had participated in a historic moment that had united the nation in grief, but they had also taken their first steps toward a future where they would carry forward the values and traditions that had defined the Queen's remarkable life. The afternoon sun broke through the London clouds as they emerged from the Abbey, and Catherine chose to see it as a sign of hope. The Queen was gone, but her influence would live on through every act of service, every moment of compassion, and every decision made with the welfare of others in mind. In the weeks following the Queen's funeral, Kensington Palace became a hub of quiet activity as Catherine and William worked to establish their new rhythm of life. The immediate period of mourning had ended, but the emotional processing of their loss continued in countless small ways throughout each day. Catherine found herself taking on responsibilities she had been gradually preparing for but had never expected to assume so soon. Her calendar, once carefully balanced between public engagements and family time, now included meetings with private secretaries, briefings on constitutional matters, and consultations about the charitable organizations that would become her primary focus as the future Princess of Wales. The role brought unexpected challenges that no amount of preparation could have fully anticipated. She discovered that every decision, from the charities she supported to the clothes she wore at public events, carried political and cultural implications that required careful consideration. The Queen had made it look effortless, but Catherine was learning that graceful public service required enormous behind-the-scenes work. William, meanwhile, was navigating his own complex transition. His father's accession to the throne meant that William was now heir apparent, a role that came with increased scrutiny and responsibility. The easy confidence he had developed over years of royal duties was being tested as he stepped into a more prominent position on the world stage. One particularly challenging morning, Catherine and William received news that several Commonwealth nations were questioning their continued participation in the monarchy following the Queen's death. The situation required delicate diplomatic handling, and Catherine found herself participating in strategy meetings with senior advisors as they developed responses that honored both tradition and the legitimate concerns of these nations. The experience opened Catherine's eyes to the complex political realities that the Queen had navigated with such skill throughout her reign. Every public statement needed to be carefully crafted to respect different viewpoints while maintaining the monarchy's position. Catherine began to understand why the Queen had always emphasized the importance of remaining above partisan politics while still being relevant to people's daily lives. During this period, Catherine and William made a decision that would define their approach to their new roles. They chose to increase their direct engagement with ordinary citizens, believing that the monarchy's future depended on maintaining genuine connections with the people they served. This meant more walkabouts, more informal meetings, and more opportunities for unscripted conversations. Their first major test came during a visit to a community center in Manchester that had been struggling with funding cuts. The visit was meant to highlight the importance of community support programs, but it also provided an opportunity for Catherine and William to demonstrate their commitment to addressing real problems rather than simply participating in ceremonial events. Catherine spent considerable time speaking with single mothers who relied on the center's childcare services to maintain employment. Their stories were heartbreaking but also inspiring, revealing the resilience and determination that existed in communities across the country. She realized that her platform could be used to amplify these voices and advocate for policies that would make a real difference in people's lives. William, meanwhile, engaged with local youth groups that used the center's facilities for sports and educational programs. He was struck by the creativity and energy of young people who had found ways to thrive despite limited resources. Their optimism and ambition reminded him why the Queen had always maintained such faith in the next generation's ability to solve the challenges facing society. One teenage girl, Sarah, particularly impressed Catherine with her articulate description of how the community center had helped her overcome family difficulties and focus on her education. Sarah spoke about wanting to become a teacher so she could help other young people the way she had been helped. Her story embodied the kind of positive cycle that effective community programs could create. The visit concluded with Catherine and William making an unscheduled stop at a nearby primary school where children had prepared a special presentation about community helpers. The children's enthusiasm and innocent questions provided a refreshing contrast to the weighty constitutional matters that had been occupying so much of their time. 8-year-old Jamie asked William if he missed his grandmother, a question that caught him off guard with its directness and sincerity. William's honest response about how the Queen's memory inspired him to work harder to help others created a moment of genuine connection that reminded everyone present why the monarchy had survived for so many centuries. As they returned to London that evening, Catherine and William reflected on how the day had reinforced their belief in the importance of accessible, relevant royal service. The Queen had understood that the monarchy's survival depended on its ability to adapt to changing times while maintaining its core values of service and duty. Catherine realized that she was beginning to develop her own approach to royal duties, one that combined the Queen's emphasis on tradition and stability with a more direct engagement with social issues. She wanted to use her position to create meaningful change, not just bring attention to problems. The evening ended with Catherine and William reviewing thank you letters from the community center visit. The genuine gratitude expressed by staff and visitors reinforced their conviction that their new roles, despite their challenges, offered unprecedented opportunities to make a positive impact on people's lives. They were beginning to understand that honoring the Queen's memory didn't mean simply continuing exactly as she had done, but rather applying her principles of service and dedication to the unique challenges and opportunities of their own generation. The foundation she had built was strong enough to support innovation and growth, as long as the core values remained unchanged. 6 months after the Queen's passing, Catherine stood in the newly redesigned garden at Kensington Palace, watching her children play among the flowers that had been planted in their great-grandmother's memory. The garden had become a place of reflection and renewal, symbolizing how life continues to grow and flourish even after profound loss. The transformation in Catherine and William over these months had been remarkable to observe. The grief that had initially overwhelmed them had gradually evolved into a deeper sense of purpose and commitment. They had discovered reserves of strength they didn't know they possessed, and their partnership had grown even stronger under the pressure of their new responsibilities. Catherine had established herself as a thoughtful and effective advocate for early childhood development, mental health awareness, and community support programs. Her natural empathy and genuine interest in people's stories had made her particularly effective at connecting complex social issues to real human experiences that the public could understand and support. Her work with the community center in Manchester had led to a broader initiative supporting similar programs across the country. Working with government officials, charitable organizations, and business leaders, Catherine had helped secure funding and resources that would benefit thousands of families facing economic challenges. The success of these programs had given Catherine confidence in her ability to create meaningful change through her royal platform. She had learned to balance advocacy with the political neutrality required of her position, finding ways to support important causes without appearing to favor particular political parties or policies. William, meanwhile, had grown into his role as heir apparent with a grace and authority that reminded many observers of the Queen herself. His military background and natural leadership abilities had served him well as he took on more complex diplomatic responsibilities and constitutional duties. One of his most significant achievements had been his successful mediation of the tensions with several Commonwealth nations that had emerged after the Queen's death. Through careful diplomacy and genuine respect for different cultural perspectives, he had helped maintain relationships that might otherwise have been lost during the transition period. His approach emphasized listening over speaking, understanding over judgment, and cooperation over confrontation. These qualities had earned him respect from world leaders who might have been skeptical about the monarchy's relevance in the modern world. The children had also shown remarkable resilience in adapting to their changed circumstances. Prince George had begun to understand more about his future role, but Catherine and William had been careful to ensure that this knowledge enhanced rather than burdened his childhood. He showed a natural curiosity about how government and society functioned, asking thoughtful questions that sometimes surprised adults with their insight. Princess Charlotte had developed a special interest in environmental conservation, inspired by stories about the Queen's love of nature and wildlife. She had started a small recycling program at her school and regularly asked her parents about ways to protect animals and their habitats. Her passion and Determination reminded Catherine of the Queen's own commitment to causes she believed in. Even young Prince Louis, now 5 years old, had begun to show signs of the empathy and social awareness that characterized his family. During visits to charitable organizations, he would often notice details that adults missed and ask questions that revealed his growing understanding of how people lived differently from his own privileged circumstances. The family's private moments had become even more precious as their public responsibilities increased. Sunday dinners remained sacrosanct, times when they could simply be a family without the weight of royal protocol. These gatherings often included stories about the Queen, keeping her memory alive for the children while helping the adults process their continuing grief and adjustment. Catherine had started a tradition of writing letters to the Queen, sharing updates about the children's development and the challenges and successes of royal life. Though she never sent these letters, the practice helped her maintain a sense of connection to the wisdom and guidance that had meant so much to her during her early years as a royal. As the first anniversary of the Queen's death approached, Catherine and William began planning a series of events that would honor her memory while looking forward to the future. They wanted to celebrate the values she had embodied rather than simply mourn her absence. The centerpiece would be a National Day of Service, encouraging people across the country to volunteer in their communities in ways that reflected the Queen's lifetime commitment to public service. Catherine and William would participate themselves, working alongside ordinary citizens to demonstrate that royal service was about action, not just ceremony. They had also established a scholarship program for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds who showed exceptional potential for community leadership. The program would provide not just financial support for education, but also mentorship and opportunities to develop the skills needed to make positive changes in society. On a quiet evening in late summer, as Catherine and William walked through their memorial garden, they reflected on how much had changed since that devastating morning when they learned of the Queen's death. The pain of loss remained, but it had been joined by a sense of gratitude for the lessons she had taught them and excitement about the opportunities to build on her legacy. Catherine realized that she had become the woman she had always hoped to be, confident in her role, passionate about her causes, and secure in her family relationships. The Queen's death had forced her to grow in ways she might never have experienced otherwise, and she was grateful for the strength she had discovered within herself. William had emerged as a leader who combined respect for tradition with openness to change, someone who could honor the past while embracing the future. His grandmother's influence was visible in every aspect of his approach to royal duties, but it was filtered through his own values and understanding of what the monarchy needed to become. Together, they had created something new, a partnership that honored the Queen's memory while establishing their own distinctive approach to service. They had learned that true leadership meant not just maintaining what others had built, but finding ways to improve and expand it for the benefit of future generations. As the stars appeared in the darkening sky above their memorial garden, Catherine and William knew that they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. They had been tested by grief and emerged stronger, united by loss but driven by hope. The Queen's greatest gift to them had not been a crown or a title, but the understanding that service to others was the most fulfilling way to live a meaningful life.